Welcome, dear friend, to a journey back through the mists of time, to an age when the northern winds whispered tales of ambition, power, and the unyielding spirit of those who carved their names into history. Tonight, we gently unfurl the saga of a man whose life was a tapestry woven with threads of exile, empire, and an insatiable quest for glory. Picture, if you will, the vast, silent fjords of Norway, where mountains cradle the calm waters, and the air itself seems to hold ancient secrets. Here, in this land of breathtaking beauty and harsh realities, a young prince was forged, destined for a path far grander and more perilous than he could ever imagine. What quiet forces shape a king from a May boy, especially when that boy is cast out from the very lands he is born to rule? This is a gentle mystery we shall explore together. In the soft embrace of this narrative, we will dive into the extraordinary life of Harald Sigurdsson, a figure who rose from the ashes of defeat to become one of the most formidable and legendary rulers of the Viking Age, a man known to history as Harald Hardrada, the Hard Ruler. We will trace his incredible odyssey, from a youthful exile battling for survival in distant lands, through the strategic maneuvers that brought him back to reclaim his birthright, to his audacious pursuit of an empire that stretched across the North Sea. Prepare to drift into a story of resilience, unwavering resolve, and the ultimate, poignant clash of destinies. So, before you settle in, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always intriguing to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Perhaps light an incense or two for that soothing fragrance. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Our story, or rather, this quiet chapter of Harald's saga, begins not with triumph, but with flight. Imagine the hushed urgency, the muffled footsteps on damp earth, the biting cold that seems to seep into one's very bones, not just from the northern air, but from the chill of shattered hopes. It is the year 1030, a turning point for young Harald, a boy of just 15 summers. His half-brother, the revered King Olaf II, had just met his tragic end at the Battle of Stiklestad. This was not a glorious last stand from Harald's perspective, but a desperate, bloody defeat, a maelstrom of steel and cries that extinguished a king's flame and scattered his loyalists to the winds. For Harald, the aftermath was a dizzying blur of danger and swift, forced departure. He was a prince, yes, but now a prince of a lost cause, a fugitive with a price on his head, hunted by the victorious forces of King Nut the Great. His survival depended on anonymity, on fading into the vast, unforgiving landscape. Picture him, a stripling, still growing into his warrior's frame, his heart undoubtedly heavy with grief and confusion, yet a nascent spark of defiance, perhaps, already kindling within his young spirit. He, along with a small, loyal band, embarked on a perilous journey eastward, seeking refuge, seeking a future, though what that future held, he could not possibly have known. Their path was one of quiet desperation, traversing dense forests where the shadows danced like watchful spirits, crossing swollen rivers whose cold embrace threatened to steal their last vestiges of hope. Each rustle of leaves, each distant dog's bark, was a potential threat, a reminder of the precariousness of their existence. It was in these quiet, harrowing moments, on the fringes of civilization, that the first subtle layers of Harald's resilience began to harden, like steel slowly cooling from the forge. Their destination was Kievan Rus, a vast and powerful realm to the east, a mosaic of principalities united under the formidable Yaroslav the Wise. This was a land known for its rich trade routes, its magnificent cities, and its welcoming embrace of Norse exiles and adventurers. For Harald, it offered not just sanctuary, but opportunity. He and his men, battle-hardened and loyal despite their youth, found immediate employment in Yugoslav service, a testament to the Norse reputation for martial prowess. Here, in this foreign land, Harald's education in the art of war continued, but it was an education far removed from the formal training of a prince. It was the brutal, immediate schooling of the battlefield. He learned to wield a sword with deadly precision, to command men not by birthright alone, but by sheer force of will and tactical acumen. He participated in campaigns against various nomadic tribes, against the Poles, and against other rival princes, each skirmish and battle honing his skills, hardening his resolve, and deepening his understanding of leadership. Imagine the sights and sounds of this new world. The bustling markets of Kiev, filled with the aroma of exotic spices and the chatter of countless tongues. The majestic, golden-domed churches rising against the sky. The endless, rolling steppes that stretch to the horizon, a stark contrast to the familiar fjords of Norway. Harald, a man of action, would have found a certain rhythm in this life, a purpose in the constant demands of military service. He was no longer merely a prince in exile. He was a warrior, a commander, building a reputation not on inherited titles, but on deeds. He quickly rose through the ranks, his natural leadership shining through, his strategic mind already beginning to perceive the subtle currents of power. He was reliable, disciplined, and unfailingly effective. Yugoslav recognized this nascent greatness, entrusting him with increasingly important commands, allowing him to amass not only experience but also considerable wealth, much of it gained through his share of battle spoils. This growing personal fortune, discreetly managed, would become a crucial foundation for his future ambitions. Yet, even amidst his successes in Kiev and Rus, a deeper calling stirred within him. The lure of the glittering Byzantine Empire, with its legendary capital, Constantinople, was a siren's song for many Norse warriors. Known to them as Miklagard, the great city, it was a place of unparalleled splendor and immense wealth, and home to the elite Varangian Guard, the personal bodyguards of the Byzantine Emperor. This prestigious unit was primarily composed of Norsemen and other northern warriors, renowned for their loyalty, their ferocity in battle, and their unwavering dedication to the emperor. For a warrior like Harald, who had already tasted the bitter ashes of defeat and the sweet fruits of victory, the Varangian Guard offered the ultimate challenge and the highest rewards. It was a chance to test himself against the best, to earn renown on a truly global stage, and perhaps to accumulate even greater riches. And so, after several years in Kiev and Rus, having solidified his standing and gathered a substantial amount of treasure, Harald made the momentous decision to journey south, towards the heart of the Byzantine world. The journey itself would have been arduous, following ancient trade routes, navigating rivers and dense forests, ever watchful for bandits or hostile forces. But the promise of Miklagard, of serving the emperor and fighting alongside the legendary Varangians, was a powerful motivator. Upon his arrival in Constantinople, a city of 1 million souls, a vibrant hub of trade, culture, and power, Harald was immediately struck by its sheer scale and magnificence. Imagine the dazzling mosaics, the towering Hagia Sophia, the intricate palaces, and the endless flow of people from every corner of the known world. It was a city unlike anything he had ever known, a testament to human ingenuity and imperial might. He joined the Varangian Guard, quickly distinguishing himself through his immense strength, his exceptional fighting skills, and his disciplined adherence to orders. The Guard was not merely a ceremonial unit. They were the emperor's most trusted warriors, deployed in the most critical and dangerous situations. Harald's time in the Varangian Guard was a period of relentless campaigning and continuous exposure to the intricacies of imperial politics. He fought in Sicily, helping to reclaim territory from Arab control, enduring the sweltering heat and the fierce resistance of the Saracen forces. He was part of expeditions against the Pechenegs on the Byzantine frontier, a nomadic people known for their swift cavalry and brutal raiding tactics. He saw action in Bulgaria, putting down rebellions and securing imperial borders. Each campaign was a crucible, further refining his military mind, teaching him about logistics, siege warfare, and the art of maintaining morale in prolonged conflicts. He learned to adapt to different terrains, different enemies, and different forms of warfare, expanding his repertoire beyond the traditional Norse fighting style. His reputation grew with each success. The sagas tell of his legendary strength in battle, his ability to cut down foes with unmatched ferocity, and his unwavering courage in the face of overwhelming odds. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a leader, inspiring his fellow Varangians through his actions and his quiet, resolute demeanor. He gained the trust of the Empress Zoe, a powerful figure in Byzantine politics, and his duties extended beyond the battlefield to include diplomatic missions and even guarding the imperial treasury, a testament to the profound trust placed in him. This access to the imperial coffers, and his scrupulous honesty, only further solidified his personal wealth, which he sent back to Kievan Rus for safekeeping, a strategic move that demonstrated his foresight and his long-term planning. Yet, life in the Byzantine court was not without its perils. It was a viper's nest of intrigue, assassinations, and sudden shifts in power. Harald, ever the astute observer, learned to navigate these treacherous waters, understanding the importance of loyalty, discretion, and swift action. He witnessed firsthand the rise and fall of emperors, the fickle nature of imperial favor, and the deadly consequences of misjudgment. These experiences, though far removed from the fjords of Norway, were invaluable. They taught him about the exercise of absolute power, the manipulation of alliances, and the brutal necessities of political survival. He was no longer just a warrior. He was becoming a statesman, a strategic thinker capable of understanding the grand chessboard of geopolitical power. By the time Harald decided to leave the Varangian Guard, around 1042, he had spent over a decade in Byzantine service. He was no longer the 15-year-old boy who had fled Norway. He was a man in his late 20s, a seasoned warrior, a wealthy commander, and a shrewd observer of power. His roaring in the north had yet to truly begin, but the foundational elements were now firmly in place. The years of exile had not broken him, they had forged him. The trials in Kievan Rus had sharpened his sword arm and his strategic mind. The exploits in the Byzantine Empire had granted him immense wealth, unparalleled military experience, and a deep understanding of governance and ambition on a grand scale. He had seen the world, conquered its challenges, and amassed the resources necessary for his ultimate goal. The whisper of his homeland, the call of the fjords, had never truly faded. It had merely been a quiet hum beneath the din of distant battles. Now, with a reputation that spanned empires and a fortune that could fund armies, the time was quietly approaching for the Lion of the North to turn his gaze homeward, his formative roar finally ready to echo across the seas. His return would not be as a humble exile, but as a formidable force, ready to reclaim his birthright and perhaps even more. The long years in the gilded halls of Byzantium and the rugged plains of Kievan Rus had transformed Harald Sigurdsson, forging him into a man of immense experience and even greater ambition. The boy who had fled Norway in desperate flight was now a formidable warrior and a shrewd tactician. his pockets heavy with the spoils of empire. The whispers of the north, however, had never truly left him, a constant, quiet hum beneath the din of distant battles and courtly intrigue. Now, in the year 1045, that hum became a resounding call, a magnetic pull back to the snow-capped peaks and deep fjords of his homeland. His gaze, once fixed on imperial horizons, now narrowed on a single, compelling prize, the crown of Norway. His return was not that of a desperate exile, but of a calculated, strategic move. Harald understood that simply arriving with his accumulated wealth and a few loyal men would not suffice to reclaim a kingdom. He needed allies, and he needed a plan. His first masterstroke of political maneuvering involved Svein Estridsson, the ambitious king of Denmark. Svein, a shrewd and perpetually restless monarch, had long harbored his own designs on Norway, constantly challenging the authority of Harald's nephew, Magnus the Good, who currently sat on the Norwegian throne. Magnus, though a strong ruler, was now facing the combined threat of two formidable adversaries. Imagine the scene of their meeting, perhaps in a quiet, coastal town in Denmark, far from prying eyes. Two kings, one de facto, one by right of lineage, both driven by an unyielding hunger for power. The air would have been thick with unspoken calculations, veiled threats, and tentative promises. Harald, with his vast wealth and proven military prowess, presented an irresistible proposition to Svein. He offered gold, seasoned warriors, and a shared enemy. Svein, in turn, offered the legitimacy of his own royal claim and the considerable military might of Denmark. It was an alliance born of mutual benefit and shared ambition, a pact that would send tremors through the Scandinavian world. Together, they launched a series of calculated raids along the Norwegian coast, not with the intention of immediate conquest, but to test Magnus's defenses, to sow discord, and to demonstrate the formidable new alliance that had been forged. These were not the haphazard raids of old, but precise, strategic incursions, designed to drain Magnus's resources and erode his support among the Norwegian jarls and chieftains. Picture the longships, sleek and menacing, gliding silently through the pre-dawn mist, their prows cutting through the cold water. Imagine the fear that would ripple through coastal communities, the whispers of Hardrada, the hard ruler, a moniker that would soon become synonymous with his relentless pursuit of power. Magnus, a pragmatic and intelligent ruler, quickly recognized the gravity of the threat. He understood that a protracted war against both Harald and Svein would bleed his kingdom dry, weakening Norway against its southern neighbor and potentially leading to his own downfall. Rather than engaging in a ruinous, drawn-out conflict, Magnus, perhaps surprisingly, opted for a different path: negotiation. He recognized Harald's legitimate claim to the throne, not just as a nephew, but as the last living male heir of Saint Olaf. The negotiations were undoubtedly tense, fraught with suspicion and deep-seated animosities. Yet, a delicate balance was struck. In a move that speaks volumes about Magnus's wisdom and Harald's persuasive power, a remarkable agreement was reached. Harald would be made co-king of Norway, sharing power equally with Magnus. In return, Harald would share half of his immense, accumulated wealth from his years abroad with Magnus. This was a colossal sum, a veritable king's ransom, that would greatly bolster Norway's treasury and allow Magnus to solidify his own position. It was a testament to Harald's cunning that he managed to regain his throne not through total war, but through a shrewd combination of military pressure and financial leverage. The quiet hum of political intrigue continued, however, even after the formal agreement. The sagas tell us that Harald, despite being co-king, chafed under the shared authority. He was a man accustomed to absolute command, to making his own destiny without constraint. The bond between the two kings was undoubtedly strained, a delicate truce built on necessity rather than genuine affection. Then, just a year after their joint rule began, fate intervened in a most dramatic fashion. In 1047, Magnus the Good died under mysterious circumstances, or perhaps simply from a sudden illness. While no foul play has ever been definitively proven, the timing was undeniably convenient for Harald. With Magnus gone, the path was clear. Harald, now the sole ruler of Norway, wasted no time in consolidating his power. The remaining jarls and chieftains, many of whom had already witnessed his ruthlessness and his strategic brilliance, quickly swore fealty. His coronation would have been a quieter affair than those of long-established kings, yet it marked a profound transformation. The exiled prince had returned, not as a desperate refugee, but as a king, a hard ruler. He adopted the moniker, embracing the reputation he had meticulously cultivated. His reign had begun, not in the traditional manner of inherited power, but forged in the fires of exile, conflict, and cunning negotiation. Harald Hardrada's early years as king were characterized by a relentless drive to solidify his newfound authority and to exert his dominance over the turbulent Norwegian realm. He was a king who understood that power was not merely taken, but constantly asserted. He undertook extensive tours of his kingdom, visiting local chieftains, demonstrating his presence, and demanding their unwavering loyalty. Those who resisted, or whose allegiance seemed uncertain, quickly felt the weight of his hard rule. He was a king who did not hesitate to use force when necessary, quashing rebellions with swift and decisive action, ensuring that no challenge to his authority went unanswered. This approach, while perhaps harsh, brought a degree of order and stability to Norway that had often been lacking in the fragmented years before his reign. He also understood the vital role of wealth in maintaining power. His vast fortune, brought back from the Byzantine Empire, allowed him to reward loyal followers, fund his burgeoning military, and embark on ambitious building projects. Imagine the construction of new longhouses, the expansion of trading posts, and the strengthening of coastal defenses. These visible signs of prosperity and strength further cemented his image as a powerful and effective ruler. He encouraged trade, understanding that a strong economy was the bedrock of a strong kingdom. Norwegian merchants, emboldened by their king's reputation, ventured further, expanding their networks and bringing new wealth into the realm. The consolidation of his power was not merely internal. Harald also turned his attention to Denmark, seeking to fully realize the implications of his earlier alliance with Svein Estridsson. Despite their initial pact, the relationship between Harald and Svein was always one of uneasy rivalry. Harald, with his insatiable ambition, believed he had a legitimate claim to the Danish throne, an echo of the earlier Scandinavian empires that had briefly united Norway, Denmark, and England under a single crown. This simmering tension would erupt into a protracted, brutal series of wars, a subject we will gently delve into in our next quiet contemplation. For now, let us simply reflect on this extraordinary return. Harald Hardrada, the exiled prince, had navigated the treacherous currents of the medieval world, from the icy fjords of Norway to the sun-baked dust of the Rus steppes, and finally to the opulent, intrigue-laden heart of Byzantium. He had gathered immense wealth, honed his martial skills to an unmatched degree, and perhaps most importantly, cultivated a keen understanding of power dynamics and human ambition. His return to Scandinavia was not a desperate gamble, but a calculated invasion, a testament to years of careful planning and relentless self-improvement. He had transformed himself from a hunted boy into a king, a hard ruler indeed. The foundation of his northern empire was now firmly laid. The serpent had returned, and Norway, now under his firm, unwavering grip, was merely the first step in a far grander design. The stage was set for an era of unprecedented expansion, driven by the relentless will of a man who had seen the world and was now determined to conquer a significant portion of it. With the crown of Norway firmly secured upon his brow, Harald Hardrada's gaze, ever restless, now extended far beyond the familiar fjords and mountain peaks. His reign, rather than settling into a period of quiet administration, became a testament to his relentless pursuit of dominance, a conscious and calculated effort to expand his influence and forge a vast North Sea empire. The seeds of this ambition had been sown during his years abroad, witnessing the grandeur and reach of both Kievan Rus and the Byzantine Empire. Now, as king, he possessed the means and the will to attempt such a feat himself. The most immediate and protracted challenge to his burgeoning empire lay to the south, Denmark. The uneasy alliance with Svein Estridsson, which had aided Harald's return to power, quickly dissolved into open conflict. Svein, a shrewd and ambitious ruler in his own right, also harbored claims to Norway and resented Harald's consolidation of power. Thus began a series of wars that would consume much of Harald's reign, a decade-long struggle marked by shifting allegiances, brutal coastal raids, and a relentless testing of wills between two formidable kings. Imagine the strategic complexities of this conflict. It was not a single, grand campaign, but a series of interconnected skirmishes, naval battles, and land incursions that ebbed and flowed with the seasons. Harald, a master of military logistics honed in Byzantium, utilized his formidable Norwegian fleet with deadly efficiency. Picture the longships, now not merely vessels of raiding, but instruments of calculated projection, their sleek forms cutting through the grey North Sea waters, carrying warriors to Danish shores. Harald would launch devastating raids on the Danish coast, burning towns and seizing valuable resources, not out of wanton destruction, but as a calculated tactic to deplete Svein's wealth and break his resolve. Svein, in response, would rally his own forces, attempting counter-invasions or seeking to undermine Harald's authority within Norway. The back-and-forth nature of these wars created a constant state of low-level tension across the region. Yet, through it all, Harald's determination remained unyielding. He understood that to truly establish a northern empire, Denmark, a vital strategic and economic rival, had to be brought to heel, or at the very least, severely weakened. His campaigns were not always about outright victory in a single battle, but about the slow, steady attrition of his opponent, a war of nerves as much as of steel. He would often withdraw after a successful raid, forcing Svein to expend resources on defense, maintaining a constant, subtle pressure. Harald's strategic brilliance extended beyond brute force. He understood the power of alliances, a lesson perhaps learned in the Byzantine court. While locked in conflict with Svein, he meticulously cultivated relationships with various English and Scottish nobles, subtly sowing discord within their realms and positioning himself as a potential ally or protector. These were not always formal treaties, but quiet understandings, exchanges of gifts, and promises of support, all designed to isolate Svein and enhance Harald's own standing on the international stage. The sagas hint at his diplomatic skills, his ability to charm and persuade, even while maintaining a formidable and somewhat detached demeanor. Economically, Harald's reign was a period of surprising prosperity, even amidst the constant warfare. His years in the East had exposed him to advanced financial practices and the importance of a robust treasury. He initiated reforms in taxation, ensuring a steady flow of revenue into the royal coffers. He promoted trade, understanding that wealth was not only a means to fund his wars but also a source of national strength and prestige. Norwegian merchants, under his protection, ventured further than before, expanding their networks and bringing back exotic goods and valuable commodities. The coin he had amassed in Byzantium was not hoarded. It was invested, circulating through his kingdom, bolstering its economy. This period also saw the development of Norway's infrastructure under Harald's strong hand. He ordered the construction of new royal estates, fortified strongholds along his borders, and improved harbor facilities to support his growing fleet. These projects served multiple purposes. They showcased his power, provided employment, and strengthened the kingdom's defenses. Imagine the bustling activity around these construction sites, the coordinated efforts of hundreds of laborers, all contributing to the physical manifestation of Harald's imperial vision. His ambition was not just abstract. It was being built, stone by stone, ship by ship. Despite his continuous engagement in warfare, Harald also recognized the importance of consolidating his domestic power and maintaining internal stability. He established a stricter legal code, enforcing his authority more firmly than many of his predecessors. He did not tolerate dissent, but he also understood the value of a strong, centralized administration. His rule, while undeniably hard, brought a certain degree of order to Norway, allowing for periods of growth and development between the campaigns against Denmark. He was a king who commanded respect, not just through fear, but through his undeniable competence and his unwavering focus on the strength and prosperity of his kingdom. The years passed in a constant rhythm of conflict and consolidation. Though no decisive victory over Svein Estridsson was ever truly achieved during this period, Harald's relentless pressure steadily eroded Danish power and asserted Norwegian dominance in the North Sea. He had, through sheer force of will and strategic brilliance, transformed Norway from a collection of fiercely independent jarls into a unified and formidable kingdom, a rising power on the European stage. He had solidified his own position as a king to be reckoned with, a ruler whose ambition seemed to know no bounds. As the decade of conflict with Denmark drew to a close, a new set of circumstances began to quietly, almost imperceptibly, emerge on the horizon. Whispers from the south, from the wealthy and fragmented land of England, began to reach Harald's ears. These were not the loud pronouncements of war, but subtle currents of information, hinting at instability, at a throne soon to be vacant, and at a destiny that might be even grander than the northern empire he was meticulously building. The protracted wars with Denmark had honed his military machine to a razor's edge, creating a seasoned army and a powerful navy. Now, a new, far richer prize began to glimmer, and Harald Hardrada, ever the opportunist, ever the ambitious king, would soon turn his gaze, his formidable will, and his hardened forces towards a far greater and more perilous gamble. The stage was being set for the culmination of his life's insatiable quest for ultimate power. As the protracted, grinding conflict with Denmark settled into a quieter, more manageable rhythm, Harald Hardrada's restless ambition began to seek new horizons. His gaze, now firmly fixed across the North Sea, turned with increasing intensity towards a prize that shimmered with unparalleled wealth and prestige, the throne of England. It was a kingdom historically intertwined with Scandinavian power, a land that had seen Norse kings sit upon its throne before, and now, it was a land steeped in a deepening succession crisis. The subtle currents of European politics were shifting, and Harald, ever attuned to the flow of power, sensed a momentous opportunity. The year 1066 dawned with a quiet tremor of uncertainty across England. Its long-reigning king, Edward the Confessor, a pious but politically complex figure, lay on his deathbed. His passing, which occurred in January of that year, plunged the realm into a maelstrom of competing claims and simmering tensions. Edward had no direct heir, and the question of who would succeed him had been a quiet undercurrent of English politics for years. Now, with his death, it erupted into a full-blown crisis, a dramatic and perilous vacuum of power that would draw in the most ambitious rulers of Europe. There were, in essence, three primary claimants, each with a compelling, if complex, case. First, and most immediate, was Harald Godwin's son, the most powerful earl in England, a man of immense influence and proven administrative skill. He claimed that Edward had named him as his successor on his deathbed, a claim quickly supported by the English Witenagemot, the council of leading figures who traditionally elected the king. He was, effectively, the English choice, a man of the land. Second was William, Duke of Normandy, a formidable and ruthless warlord. William claimed that Edward had, years prior, promised him the throne, a promise supposedly confirmed by Harald Godwin's son himself during an earlier visit to Normandy. William also held the powerful backing of the Pope, who viewed his claim as legitimate and perhaps saw an opportunity to bring the English Church more firmly under Roman influence. His claim, therefore, carried a heavy religious and political weight. And then, there was Harald Hardrada. His claim, while perhaps less direct than the others in recent memory, was rooted deeply in the turbulent history of the North Sea. He asserted a right to the English throne through a pact made decades earlier between his nephew, Magnus the Good, and the then King of England, Harthacnut. This pact, forged in an earlier era of Scandinavian dominance, stipulated that if either king died without an heir, the other would inherit his throne. While Harthacnut's death had not led to Magnus's ascension, Harald, ever the opportunist, resurrected this old claim, using it as a powerful justification for his own ambitions. Furthermore, his claim was bolstered by the arrival of Tostig Godwin's son, Harald Godwinson's exiled and embittered brother. Tostig, driven by a thirst for revenge and a desire to reclaim his lost earldom, actively sought out Harald, offering him vital intelligence, support, and a promise of English allies if Harald would invade. Imagine the quiet, yet intense discussions between Harald and Tostig. Tostig, desperate and persuasive, painting a picture of an England ripe for the taking, weakened by internal divisions and ripe for a powerful, decisive ruler. Harald, ever the pragmatist, weighing the risks against the immense rewards. The thought of adding England, with its fertile lands, its thriving towns, and its rich silver mines, to his burgeoning northern empire must have been an irresistible allure. It was the ultimate prize, the culmination of a lifetime of relentless ambition. The decision to invade England was not made lightly. It represented a monumental undertaking, a vast logistical challenge that dwarfed any of his previous campaigns. It would require the mobilization of an enormous fleet, the recruitment of a massive army, and the accumulation of vast resources. But Harald, with his years of experience in leading large-scale expeditions in Byzantium, was uniquely equipped for such an endeavor. He began his preparations with characteristic quiet efficiency. Shipwrights across Norway worked tirelessly, felling trees and shaping timber into the sleek, formidable longships that would carry his invasion force. Warriors from every corner of his kingdom, drawn by the promise of plunder and glory, flocked to his banner. Mercenaries, eager for wealth and battle, joined their ranks. The scale of the undertaking was unprecedented for Norway. The air would have hummed with suppressed excitement, a quiet anticipation of the enormous gamble ahead. Provisions were gathered, weapons forged, and strategies meticulously planned. Harald's use of warfare, his tactical acumen, and his unyielding will have forged a military machine honed to perfection. He had a seasoned army, a powerful navy, and a treasury overflowing with the wealth accumulated during his decades abroad. All of these elements, slowly and deliberately, were now being marshaled for one final, monumental gamble. As the summer of 1066 ripened, the pieces of this grand, tragic drama slowly fell into place. Harald Godwin's son, newly crowned King of England, found himself facing an impossible choice: defend his northern coast from Harald Hardrada's imminent invasion, or prepare for William of Normandy's equally threatening crossing of the Channel. The storm was gathering, and England, caught between three ambitious giants, braced for an unprecedented trial by fire. For Harald, this was the moment he had been quietly building towards for over 30 years. His flight from Stiklestad, his arduous journey to Kievan Rus, his triumphs in the Byzantine Guard, and his relentless wars with Denmark, all of it had been preparation for this ultimate test. His ambition, once a quiet ember, now blazed into a magnificent, consuming fire. He was not just seeking a crown. He was seeking to establish a lasting legacy, to etch his name irrevocably into the annals of history as the builder of a true northern empire. The risks were immense, the stakes immeasurable, but for Harald Hardrada, the call of destiny was too strong to resist. He would venture forth, one last time, to claim what he believed was rightfully his. The stage was now set for the final, thunderous act of his extraordinary life. The massive invasion fleet, bearing the flower of Norwegian might, was ready to set sail, its prows pointed towards the glittering, vulnerable shores of England. The grand gamble had begun. With the summer of 1066 at its peak, Harald Hardrada, the Hard ruler, launched his monumental invasion of England. His fleet, a vast armada of longships laden with the flower of Norwegian might, sailed across the North Sea, a formidable spectacle that spoke of his boundless ambition. Accompanying him was toasted Godwin's son, the exiled brother of England's newly crowned King Harald, whose bitter counsel and local knowledge proved invaluable. Their initial landing was in the quiet waters of the River Tyne, a deliberate strategic move designed to avoid the more heavily defended southern coasts. Harald's campaign began with a series of swift and decisive victories that sent ripples of alarm throughout England. His seasoned warriors, accustomed to the disciplined ferocity of Byzantine campaigns and the relentless coastal raids against Denmark, proved devastatingly effective. They first sailed south, raiding Scarborough, a coastal town, with a brutal efficiency that announced their presence and spread fear. The sagas describe the town being set ablaze, a stark warning to any who might resist. This initial aggression was not merely for plunder. It was a psychological weapon designed to instill terror and disorient the English defenses. The next significant engagement was the Battle of Fulford, near York, on September 20th. Here, Harold's forces confronted the armies of the northern English earls, Edwin of Mercia and Morcar of Northumbria. The ensuing battle was a testament to Harold's tactical brilliance and the overwhelming might of his veteran army. The English forces, likely caught off guard and perhaps less experienced than Harold's own, were decisively routed. The sagas recount a fierce and bloody encounter, though our focus remains on the consequences rather than the visceral details. This victory opened the path to York, the most important city in northern England, which quickly surrendered to Harold, offering hostages and provisions. The momentum was undeniably with the invaders. The quiet hum of their success grew louder, resonating across the land. Meanwhile, King Harald Godwin's son in the south had been patiently awaiting William of Normandy's invasion, massing his forces along the southern coast. News of Harold's landing and the fall of York, however, forced him into a desperate, almost unthinkable decision. With an astonishing display of speed and resolve, Harald Godwinson immediately disbanded his southern forces and embarked on a forced march northward, covering over 180 miles in just 4 days. This was an unprecedented feat of medieval logistics and endurance, a testament to Harold's determination and the loyalty of his housecarls. The English king was moving with a quiet fury, intent on confronting the Norse threat head-on. Harold, confident after his victories and perhaps lulled by the swift submission of York, had, for a fleeting moment, relaxed his guard. His army, anticipating a period of rest and negotiation for the city's ransom, had encamped at Stamford Bridge, a small village east of York. Many of his men had left their heavy armor on their ships, believing the immediate threat was over. It was a fatal miscalculation, a moment of overconfidence that history would remember as the pivot point of his magnificent, yet ultimately doomed, ambition. On September 25, 1066, the quiet morning at Stamford Bridge was shattered by the unexpected arrival of Harald Godwinson's English army. The surprise was absolute. The Norwegian forces, caught unprepared, scrambled to form a defensive line. The sagas speak of a lone, gigantic Norwegian warrior who, for a time, single-handedly held the narrow bridge, cutting down countless Englishmen, a testament to the individual bravery that characterized both sides. This act of quiet, desperate heroism bought his comrades precious time to form their shield wall. The battle that ensued was brutal and relentless, a desperate, close-quarter struggle on the narrow confines around the bridge. The English, fueled by the sheer exhaustion of their march and the fury of defending their homeland, pressed the attack with unwavering ferocity. Harald Hardrada, ever the warrior, fought at the forefront of his men, leading by example, his imposing figure a beacon in the swirling chaos of the melee. He wielded his sword with the same skill that had brought him glory in a dozen distant lands, inspiring his loyal Varangians and the Norwegian housecarls who had followed him across the sea. But fate, in its cruel irony, had other plans for the last true Viking. In the thick of the fighting, an English arrow, or perhaps a spear, struck Harald Hardrada in the throat, silencing his formidable roar forever. His fall sent a ripple of despair through his ranks. Toasted Godwinson, his ambition consuming him to the very end, also perished in the battle, his quest for vengeance tragically intertwined with Harold's grand design. The death of their king broke the Norwegian resistance. A final, desperate stand was made by the remaining Norwegians, but they were overwhelmed. The Battle of Stamford Bridge was a catastrophic defeat for Harald Hardrada and for Norway. The vast fleet that had carried his dreams of empire across the North Sea now carried only a fraction of his returning forces. The saga tells us that of the hundreds of ships that arrived, only a mere 24 were needed to transport the survivors back home. It was a devastating blow, not just to Harold's ambition, but to the very fabric of Norse military might and expansion. The immediate aftermath was one of profound shock and sorrow for the Norse world. The most famous and formidable Viking of his age, a king who had ruled with an iron fist and dreamed of an empire, lay dead on a foreign field. Stamford Bridge marked more than just a military defeat. It was a symbolic turning point, often cited by historians as the definitive end of the Viking Age itself. The era of grand-scale, ambitious Norse expansion, spearheaded by figures like Harald, had reached its violent, conclusive end. The focus of European power would shift. For Harald Godwinson, it was a moment of triumphant, if brief, reprieve. He had secured his kingdom from one formidable threat. Yet, even as the bodies were being counted at Stamford Bridge, another, even greater storm was brewing on the southern horizon. Just 3 days after his hard-won victory, William of Normandy landed at Pevensey Bay, ushering in the final, fateful chapter of 1066 and forever altering the course of English history. Harald Hardrada's death, while a tragedy for his own people, inadvertently cleared the path for William the Conqueror. The ultimate sacrifice Harald made, in his relentless pursuit of a dream, had a ripple effect far beyond the immediate battlefield, quietly shaping the destiny of nations. His hammer had fallen, but its echo would resonate through the ages, a haunting reminder of ambition's cost. Settled on the field of Stamford Bridge, and with it, the ambitions of Harald Hardrada. His death on that fateful September day in 1066 marked not just the end of an extraordinary life, but a symbolic turning point in history. The quiet, relentless pursuit of empire, the audacious voyages, and the fierce battles that had defined the Viking Age for centuries began their slow, inevitable decline. While Viking activity would continue in various forms, the era of grand, ambitious Scandinavian kings leading massive expeditions to conquer foreign lands had effectively concluded. Harald was, in many ways, the last true embodiment of that warrior king ideal, a man whose life perfectly encapsulated the daring, the ruthlessness, and the boundless ambition that characterized his age. Harald's immediate legacy in Norway was complex. His death plunged the kingdom into a brief period of uncertainty. His surviving sons, Olaf Kira and Magnus II, jointly succeeded him, but Magnus's reign was short, leaving Olaf as the sole ruler. Olaf, perhaps learning from his father's relentless expansionism, chose a different path. His rule, known as the Peaceful, ushered in an era of internal stability and diplomatic engagement rather than aggressive warfare. Norway, under Olaf, began to consolidate its internal structures, developing a stronger church and a more formalized legal system. It was a quieter, less dramatic period, but one that allowed the kingdom to heal and grow after Harald's tumultuous reign. The echo of Harald's hard rule, however, had left an indelible mark, establishing a stronger, more centralized monarchy than Norway had known before. His forceful consolidation of power had laid the groundwork, perhaps inadvertently, for a more unified and stable future. Beyond Norway, Harald's life had a far wider, quieter impact on European history, particularly on the destiny of England. His invasion, though ultimately a failure for him, had a profound, albeit indirect, consequence. By forcing Harald Godwin's son to undertake that grueling, lightning-fast march north to Stamford Bridge, Harald exhausted the English army. He essentially softened the ground for William the Conqueror. When Harald Godwinson's forces, weary from battle and their incredible journey, turned south to face William at Hastings just 19 days later, they were not at their peak strength. The sagas, and subsequent historical analyses, confirmed this exhaustion. The ferocity and resilience of the English at Hastings were remarkable, but their resources were undeniably depleted by the northern campaign. Harald Hardrada's desperate gamble, though it cost him his life, played a crucial, if unintended, role in the Norman conquest of England, an event that fundamentally reshaped English language, culture, and governance for centuries to come. His final act, though a defeat, was a quiet catalyst for one of the most significant transformations in medieval European history. Culturally, Harald Hardrada lived on in the sagas, the epic tales of Norse heroes and kings. He became a legendary figure, the epitome of the Viking warrior, celebrated for his bravery, his cunning, and his insatiable wanderlust. These sagas, often embellished and heroicized over time, ensured that his name and his exploits would be remembered for generations. His journey, from exiled prince to emperor's god to king of Norway, resonated deeply with a people who valued resilience, daring, and the pursuit of glory. He was the subject of poems, songs, and oral traditions, solidifying his place in the collective memory of the Norse world. Even today, he remains a figure of fascination, a symbol of an age when Scandinavia cast a long shadow across Europe. His legacy is also quietly reflected in the strategic and economic policies he implemented. Harald, more than many of his predecessors, understood the importance of a strong economy, of stable trade routes, and of a centralized treasury. His exposure to the advanced administrative systems of Byzantium undoubtedly influenced his approach to governance. He was not just a warrior king. He was an administrator, a diplomat, and a shrewd financial manager. While his reign was dominated by warfare, his underlying reforms and focus on wealth creation laid a foundation for Norway's continued development in the subsequent centuries. He brought a degree of sophistication to his northern kingdom that was ahead of its time for the region. Ultimately, Harald Hardrada's life stands as a powerful testament to ambition and adaptability. He was a man who embraced exile not as a defeat, but as an opportunity for growth and learning. He navigated the treacherous courts of Byzantium, commanded armies across vast empires, and returned to reclaim his birthright with a wealth and experience few European monarchs could match. His reign, though cut short, redefined the scope of Norwegian power and ambition. Stamford Bridge was his final, thunderous roar, a tragic end to a magnificent journey. But the echoes of his hard rule, his relentless pursuit of greatness, continued to resonate long after his passing, quietly shaping the course of nations and etching his name into the very fabric of medieval history. He remains, for those who listen closely, a quiet reminder of an age of giants and the enduring power of a single man's will.